welcome everybody back to the Raising Men podcast. I have a great opportunity today to speak with Eric Palazzolo and Andy Paquette of the Power Tech podcast. I've been following along with what they've been doing online, social media, and reached out. And Eric has been kind enough to respond. I've had some great conversations with Coach Andy. If you're not following their podcast, I highly recommend, if you're into hockey at all, if you're raising children, if you're trying to understand the landscape, the Power Tech podcast is absolutely amazing. You get lots of content. It's great. It's very organic, lots of back and forth. So I'm blessed enough to have these guys on board. Welcome, Andy. Welcome, Eric. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, and I'm glad to be here with you, Dave.
Yep, doing awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind, could you explain sort of what kind of got you to this point of having this podcast, and maybe a little bit of what you do? I know you do some training. I've heard you talk about your summer training. Anything else that you can add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start off. I started off my company in the year 2000 after I was done playing hockey and done coaching. I coached here in the OHL with the Sudbury Wolves, and went out in the real world and tried to get a job, and I didn't like it. I'm a hockey guy. I figured that out real quick. It was about passion. So I started training hockey players and very quickly grew into training the best hockey players, like from southwestern Ontario. So that just grew and grew and grew. So traveled all over the place, and I've trained a lot of NHL players, some Stanley Cup winners, some CHL defensemen of the year, a couple of them, Aaron Ekblad and Sergachev, that plays for Tampa, who just won a Stanley Cup. That's the kind of level of guys that I train. Like on the ice. And then in 2008, I opened up my earlier I opened up a gym that failed, but then that's part of the deal though. And then I opened up my next gym here in 2008, 2009, and started incorporating the fitness with it. And then in 2016, I was kind of sick of having people that I trained that worked for me, like my instructors, thinking that they can, I'll just go do my own. And it was kind of bothering me a little bit. Yeah. So I wanted to get into the online. I figured if I did my stuff online, people would be pretty interested in that. And that, so I had a whole bunch of videos made up and it was going, but it was me doing everything and Eric wasn't around quite as much. So just can't do it all. Yeah. I started doing podcasts. Actually, they were called webinars at the time. It had some, sports psychologists, ex-players that I trained, stuff like that coming on the podcast or the webinar. And then when Eric was able to come full time with me, he was able to tighten everything up, and we got into the podcasting and the reason for that is the podcast, we wanted to keep it towards parents, players, and coaches, and give everybody an avenue to actually maybe get some secondhand experience. It's good to have experience, but it's the experience of others is just as good, sometimes even better. So what we try to provide in the podcast is, perspectives, like exactly what you were saying and what we're talking about today is, when people go through the hockey world, they look at what everybody else is doing and they think, okay, I got to do that. And, you'll get some advice from people and probably deep down, it's probably wrong. But you think you got to go with the flow. And for coaches, a lot of the times is, how do I deal with a player? How do I deal with parents? And then from a kid's perspective is like, how to become a hockey player? Like, is it easy? Is it hard? What do I do? What do I work on? What challenges am I going to face? And all those different things. So that's the basis of the podcast. And then of course, in our daily life outside of the podcast, we're running skills training, mostly with a higher level player. And then we have the gym, which Eric runs my gym and the fitness and does a great job with that. So we build a really good relationship with our players and parents.
You guys have done a great job. I know you mentioned Ekblad. My kids actually last week were training with Max Ivanov in Hamilton. We brought him in, so I know he does a lot of stuff down there. But yeah, I watch what you guys are doing, obviously online, and I think for parents, not to interrupt, but for parents, like myself, it's such challenging to navigate this space because if you have kids that love the sport and maybe they're doing successful at it, you hear things, you get people talking to you about stuff, you get crazy offers, you get, maybe your own ego as a parent. As a dad, I played okay hockey. I wasn't great, but you want your kids to succeed, and you see them having an opportunity and you really don't know where to take it. So I think for a lot of people like myself, we're very lucky to have what you're doing, and very appreciative of what you're doing. I think that podcast is awesome, and if I get a chance, I'd love to bring my kids to train with you. I've heard Eric talk a lot about the programming that you guys do at the gym, sort of the mentorship that you're providing these kids, the stuff that you demand of them, and how you show them to be prepared, not just hockey, but life, right? And I think that's a big part of it. Like, not everybody's going to go and play NHL hockey, and what are the life experiences. So having people like both yourself, Andy and Eric, doing it, I think is absolutely incredible. So thank you.
Yeah, actually, one of the things you just said there about the mentorship and all that kind of stuff is one of the things. Just I'm speaking for parents right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A heads up is when people come in here, we just don't say yes. Yes, you can come in, and yes, we'll do whatever you want, whatever suits you is the best. Like, that's kind of goes opposite of what most businesses do. Mm-hmm. We actually qualify our customers, and we qualify our kids. And Eric has rules on the board, like just simple things. And I know raising men, this is really important from your perspective, is when you grab a weight, put it back exactly the way you found it.
Yeah.
And it's not light. You better do it. And because or else you don't fit in here. And it's being polite, and it's being on time. If you're late, there's consequences for it. And we teach them how to be men. That's it's almost taboo now, because we got to be. Everybody likes to tiptoe around things a lot of the times, but the thing is that you're not doing anybody any favors. So when the kids come here, they're ready, and they're ready to work out, and they have their drinks, and they're on time, and they put things away, they help each other out, and they do all the things that, as parents like you and I, that's what we want our kids to be like. So that's part of the deal of being a hockey player, right? Is being able to take care of your own stuff. And be respectable, and be a pleasure and not a burden to people when you go places.
I love it. I think, again, preparing them with life skills. I know the podcast being Raising Men, it's still going to apply to moms raising children. It's still going to apply to anybody raising athletes. And I know we're talking about hockey, but I think this applies to like every sport. And one of the things that I try to instill with my kids is like, you're lucky to have what you have. And you're lucky to have these opportunities. And obviously they've been doing really well in the sport, so they get opportunities that maybe others don't have. And then on top of that, one of the things that I find has been frustrating with this whole hockey thing is that, there are people that sort of know where to go or how to get the better training or how they got their kids to a certain level, and they don't share the information. It's like they keep it a secret, because it's almost like if somebody else is going to get better than their kid. Yeah. And it's very frustrating because my family, my kids, we've lived in a couple of different cities, and it's been the same experience. It's like you've got to continue to figure out where you need to go or what you need to do or where the better options are. And no one's there saying, well, I shouldn't say that. We've been blessed enough to have a few people that have been incredible for us. But, there are times where you're looking at a kid and you're going, hey, how'd they get to be that great? And no one says anything until you figure it. Oh, they're training over there at this guy's place. And okay, now I got to figure it out, So for me, I didn't come from money. My parents didn't have a lot of money. My dad drove truck. My mom worked at an admin job. They, did everything they possibly could to give me the best they could. So it's frustrating for me. I know hockey is a very expensive sport, and, for families, there's kids that just don't get the opportunity, and they could be an incredible athlete. It's very frustrating to be in a sport that is expensive and see these, it's kind of at times like this exclusive, group. And it's, there's a lot of kids that don't have money or don't have things, and they just need the support. So in saying all that, what I'm going forward with here is that I really love what you're doing. I think it's more than just the podcast. I think it's helping a lot of people, and I appreciative to have you guys here.
Yeah. And that's the goal.
Yeah. So thank you guys. I'm going to ask a few questions if you don't mind. This is just based on my own experiences so far and some of the questions that have come up, and maybe get you guys to answer, get Eric involved in some questions here. One of the things I will ask, I know one of your podcasts, you talked about doing some training or being brought over by Igor Larionov. And maybe if you want to share like briefly that kind of how that came about, because I thought that was really cool. I'm like, man, like,
yeah. So what was the question? The training,
Igor.
Well, I believe in one of your podcasts, you talked about Igor Larionov having you head over to, I believe, Russia to do some training for him. And I thought that was like super cool. I'm like,
okay. I thought the question was what he brought over to me, and I was going to say, I just want to make sure you got that right. I brought it to him.
Problem. Yeah.
It was good. It was probably I built a really nice relationship with Igor. What happened was probably in 2000, I'm trying to think, 13.
Yeah.
One of the NHL agents called me and said that Igor was going to be around watching one of the sessions I was doing in Detroit one night, and he wanted to meet me because he heard some stuff about me. So when I was on the ice doing my clinic, he came over to the sideboards and at the door and opened it up. He goes, Andy, come here, please. So I came over and he introduced himself, and I was very nice to meet you. Obviously, like the funny thing is, I read books as a kid on Russian hockey, Tarasov and Tikhonov and Tretiak and all these things. So I was very interested in the Russian hockey. So he grabbed me and he says, "You need to come to Russia with me." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. Like, I'm running a clinic here. Let's talk." So, anyways, he waited for me till I was done, and then he grabbed me and said, "Okay, let's talk. Let's get your passport. Let's go over to Russia." I'm like, "What are you talking about, man? Like, hang on." So, anyways, that was the evolution he saw. We had a really good conversation. We talked about what interesting is the books I read kind of helped me have a better conversation with him other than just hockey. I think it took that wall down so he could say, "Oh, this guy's actually a pretty good guy. He's interested in me as well as I am with him." So we talked a little bit about his about how they trained and stuff. And that was actually one of the questions I asked him. I said, "Why do you want me to go over? I mean, you come from Russia, and it's especially in that era when they were the Green Line, the Russian Five or whatever they were called, and they were the best team in the world for decades. And you've seen the best players, like the Russian players were mostly my idols. Like I used to love Krutov. I just could watch that guy play all day. But he said, "No, Andy, you're going to blow the doors off of these guys." I'm like, "Really? Interesting." So when I went over there, he said it fell apart basically over there. They needed something. So when I went over there, he had probably 150, 200 coaches watching every session. Oh, wow. And I went out there and he said, "Just do your thing. Just do whatever you want to do." So I was over there in Russia for 12 days. And then we did that, talked to all their the coaches, had some really good Russian players, and did that for 12 days, loved it, and built a really good relationship with Igor. And it did that a few times for him. So it was great. And it's been a great thing. And it's the wonderful thing about it was, as you were saying about yourself, it didn't come from a whole lot. Neither did I. And one of my goals when I was done playing hockey was I wanted to teach around the world a little bit. And I've been to a couple of countries, but Russia was the big one. And when I got that invitation to go over there and train Russian hockey players and fly over there, it was almost unbelievable, because it was actually a dream come true through a lot of hard work, but it was a dream come true. So when I went there, I had to pinch myself, because I'm like, okay, here I am, here we go. But the weird thing was the rubber meets the road. Now I had an opportunity to either prove myself or fall flat on my face, and you're not as good as you thought you were. And fortunately for me, it went obviously, because I worked with Igor quite a bit after that. It went very, very well, and it was good. But it was as exciting as it was. There was a lot of fear that I had to face doing that, because I was going to a lot of unknowns. So, but man, what an awesome experience it was. And I could talk all day about this trip, but I know we only have 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, man. I obviously know what you're doing, and I just wanted to share that for the viewers. I think it's awesome. So I'm gonna move forward with some questions, and we'll rock through them. But maybe for Eric, obviously from a training side of things, one of the pieces that I've always struggled with as a dad, because you want to continue to feed the wolf, they say. You want to continue to provide the training and keep them growing. But how often would you say that, I've got a 7-year-old, I've got a 10-year-old, and then obviously there's, the 15-year-olds preparing for the OHL. Like, how often should these kids be on the ice to be effective? And then even off ice training, like what might you suggest?
Yeah. So, well, it's an evolution, and there's certain things that are appropriate at certain ages. And I know Andy and I are pretty aligned on all this stuff, which is what makes how we do the programming here so effective for a lot of these kids. Is when you're young, one of the things that I find with parents when they're asking this question, the younger you get, it seems like the more they want to be doing, and they think they need things that are super structured. They need a specific training program because, to your point earlier, how you said everybody wants the secret, everyone wants the secret advantage, those kind of things. There really isn't one when you're young. So when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, even up till the time you hit puberty as a boy, there's only so much that you need to be doing. It should all be in some kind of a fun environment and learning to be just a general athlete. That's what is appropriate for that age group. So if you're a 10-year-old and somebody's selling you on a hockey specific off ice training program, that's actually not appropriate at that age, because these kids don't really know how to move their body. They don't know basic movement patterns. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They don't know any of those things yet. And you have to build, people say a lot, the foundation, right? It's all about the foundation, being an athlete and moving properly first. That's the first thing. And that's just general. There's nothing about that needs to be specific to hockey necessarily. You could do it in the framework of games. You can do it in the framework of playing another sport. You could do it in the gym if you wanted to, if you're doing something that's that the kids are taking to and they can actually pay attention and listen to. But it all, at that age, up until the point where, let's say you hit puberty, it should be something that's fun, where the kids want to do it. That's the biggest thing that I find, where even here we have a skating treadmill in the facility here, and a lot of times it's the parents making the kids come and do the skate. And that's just a recipe for failure when you're that age. The kids have to learn to find their own love, and you can't force it on them. And hopefully as they get up to around the puberty age, then that's where you have to start to take training a little bit more seriously, and you're going to shift kind of what your focus is. So this should be things like starting to get used to the weight room, starting to get used to some weight training, learning how to do those movement patterns with resistance. And if you've been playing sports up to that point, it would be, hopefully you're going to be getting something that is applying specific to your sport as you start to get older, into those older ages. So once you're in the OHL or in junior hockey or prepared for that, you should be doing some kind of a program that's at least, I would say, 5 times a week in terms of off-ice training. And then on the ice, depending on your off-season, you're going to be on the ice during the season 5-6 times a week. And then in the off-season, a little bit less. And then you're going to be going to something a little bit more towards the end of the off-season into the summertime. So that's what I would say about that, just generally. I don't know if you have any more specific questions than that.
Yeah, no, I it's one of the questions that obviously, like, there's parents I've heard of doing, they got 10-year-olds doing 15, 20 hours of ice time a week. My boys play highly competitive baseball as well. And one of my boys just recently made an Ontario team at AAA level, and they're going to be training all year. And I thought, this is awesome, because now, he can play hockey all year, or not all year, but he can play hockey in the winter, and he's still going to get kind of an off ice training, but it's going to be baseball, something totally different. Still athletic movements. And I thought, this is great. Like, it's not going to be all hockey all the time. But there are parents that I've seen doing a crazy amount of training. I've always wondered if it would really make that much of a difference. Some of the research that I have done or seen, there's some actual university studies on the amount of physical exercise in a sport. And what I've found is, in those studies, the recommendation is basically 1 hour of training per year of birth for the total week. And that's off ice, on ice, dry land, whatever that is, like the total amount of dedicated exercise for a given sport would be a maximum of 1 hour per year of birth. So a 10-year-old would be like a maximum of 10 hours, essentially, is what the studies that research is showing.
Yeah. Sorry, just let me hop in on that quick, but just before, because I know Andy wants to pipe in too, but yeah. When it comes to things, especially when it comes to, we're very evidence-based with what we do in here as well. But the thing that parents specifically need to keep in mind with their kids that are young is they have to want to do what they're doing. So even if it is X number of hours that evidence says this is optimal, a lot of times the studies is real life isn't optimal. And all those studies, all of those studies are it comes down to, it's giving you an average, or it's giving you something that works for a group in general, but it comes down to the individual that actually has to follow the prescription, right? So one thing it's really important to keep in mind, especially when people are trying to identify how many workouts or how much time spent, and all those things are great. And obviously you want to follow certain prescriptions. Some are more appropriate than others, but the plan that works is the plan that somebody's going to stick to. And that's what gets lost a lot of times for parents, right?
I love that. I love that.
I would just
go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
I would just also say, like Eric, one of the first things he said, and this is what I would say right off the bat, is number one, when it comes to training, when it comes to hockey, it's your intent. Like, and most of the times, like I've got a saying that I use all the time. It's, you've got motivated parents, you got motivated players, but they usually don't live in the same house. It's very true. So the intent on why you're doing sports and why you're doing the training, like, where's that coming from? So that's number one. Number two is are you having fun? This, like, I had a conversation with someone, because someone around this area was trying to get kids to not play hockey and just train. And I'm like, train for what? What do you, like, honestly, what are you training for? There's 750, maybe 800 guys now that play in the National Hockey League. So you're going to be very disappointed. I'll put money on it. So what are you actually training for? Sports is supposed to be fun. That's number one. So when I see a kid that doesn't have access, like you said earlier about, like, maybe the trainers and all that stuff, that kid will find a way because he loves the game and he's having fun doing it. So what is it going to be? He might be shooting pucks. Maybe it's the rollerblades. Maybe it's whatever it is, anything he could do to get his hands on hockey. I'll take that kid any day before a kid that is highly trained by some guy that has pylons and has a whistle on, guys. Any day. Yeah. Now, as far as the off-ice stuff goes, as a younger kid, and I could use my son as an example because he's a fairly successful hockey player. As a dad, I was a former player, and a trainer. I understood this from the get-go, that I needed to have him to do these things on his terms, more or less. I'm there to nudge and to be the rudder of the ship, and maybe make some suggestions and make him think. But at the end of the day, it had to be him. So he, a lot of the times he would want to play sports, and I just didn't feel like it, like hockey. And I knew he had too much, and I would say, "Hey, Charlie, how about we? You ever play squash? I don't think you played squash yet, right?" He goes, "No." So we went and played squash. Well, guess what happened? He fell in love with squash, boxing, jiu-jitsu, baseball, football, lacrosse. He played all these sports. A lot of people would say, "Well, how does that transfer into hockey?" I mean, it's everything. Like, if you just take a game like squash, you're learning your hand-eye coordination, which if you go to the long-term athletic development plan, it's all laid out for people, but people try to complicate things. Just play a lot of sports. So if you play a game like squash, you got hand-eye coordination, you have quick feet, right? Your stop starts, and you have to have an eye for a game. There's a little bit of strategy to it. Lacrosse, well, you couldn't get anything more aligned with hockey than that game, except the more importantly is you have to learn the defensive side, or else you don't get to play. And then there's the contact. So you get used to that really early. You play the football, all these different sports, you actually become an athlete. And what I find with a lot of guys is they become very good at doing skill drills because they have their private trainers and all these different things, but they're not actually good athletes, and they haven't thought the game.
They're great at social media.
Yeah. So I would say, like, and I know it sounds like archaic.
Yeah.
But I do it with my older guys as we get into the small area games after we do a certain amount of training, because the small area games teach you how to play hockey. There's so many kids out there that are fairly well trained, but they don't know how to play hockey. And parents and the kids get this perception that they're actually really good. But when it comes down to the game, they haven't got a clue. And then they're 14, 15. They don't get drafted in the OHL. And then they say, well, I'm just going to get a scholarship. That's what the parents say. And then they realize at 20 that they didn't get a scholarship either. And where did I fail? Well, it's not that you failed, but you just didn't let them be kids. The kid himself will decide whether he's going anywhere. And that really is the bottom line. And by him having fun, by him having a lot of fun doing it, you'll take the chance of him succeeding, and you'll incrementally get better. I don't know if that was the proper sentence, but
that's perfect. And that kind of leads into a few questions that I had with regards to, and I know you've spoken on some of your podcasts about spring hockey. I know this summer for one of my boys, we had an opportunity to play in the Brick tournament, and unfortunately from a financial aspect, and I know this happens for a lot of families, but for a financial aspect, we just couldn't do it. It came right down to 99th hour, and I had to call the team and essentially say I just can't afford it. And so, how do you feel about spring hockey? Things like the brick tournament and these big tournaments that sort of try to get kids in to play.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go first because I know you can go on a tear on this. Just real quick, because we talk about the spring hockey topic quite a bit. Yeah. And the first thing is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with playing spring hockey, and there's nothing necessarily right about playing spring hockey. It goes back to what Andy mentioned earlier about the intention. It's why are you playing spring hockey? And a lot of times for kids, it looks like the parents think because they play on this team or in this tournament, they're going to increase their chances of X opportunity in the future. And the reality of it is that it really doesn't matter, because you can find a kid that did it every which way. You can take whatever guy that plays in the NHL, trace his history, and you'll find a kid that played in the brick tournament, that didn't play spring hockey, that played one tournament, that all that kind of stuff. So there's nothing necessarily good or bad about it. It's just that it depends on why you're doing the thing you're doing. If for me, and then I'll pass it to Andy, is if financially it's not putting a strain on your family, that's fine. If the kid wants to play and he's doing it because he likes to play and has been bugging you about it and whatever, those are reasons that make sense. But if the reason ends up being, wow, what a great opportunity, I have to get him there so that later on he gets X, that to me is where the decision is kind of going the wrong way now. So that's kind of my overview of the spring hockey thing. And I know Andy has a bunch of thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I always sound negative when I talk about spring hockey and actually hockey clinics in general. And I don't mean to sound negative. It's just I've got a pretty strong opinion on it. Now, having said that, number one, what's the intent? From my experience of the last 20 years, the intent is parents put their kids in this because they feel more is better. As we said earlier, what's the secret? And, you follow everybody else, and everyone thinks that must be the secret. The intention in a lot of the spring terms is they're trying to get on the best team to play with the best players, is what a lot of people say. And then they say that you get noticed and you start building your network and all this stuff. If that's the intention of playing spring hockey, and another one I heard from someone that I really didn't expect to hear this from, he said that you'll find out where you stand. Well, doesn't matter at 10, like the brick term is 10-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you could be the best guy in the world. I could tell you stories about these guys. It doesn't matter, because the best guy at 10 will not be, or I shouldn't say will not, most likely will not be the best guy at 15 and 20. So anyways, as far as the spring hockey and the brick goes, it's like, where would I say, yeah, go for it? Because there's times where to me it would make sense. For example, if my son had just a really miserable year in hockey, so let's say he was maybe got injured and he missed a good chunk of the season, or his coaching experience was like really negative, or along those lines, and a spring tournament came up. Now, trust me, I wouldn't be flying to Edmonton for it. I'd find a local one, you know what I mean? A local one that costs a couple $100 for a couple weekends. Yeah. And it is what it is. It's so you get to play hockey again and get your feel back and make you feel good. Maybe I can buy that one. But other than that, I don't see it. It's a financial drain. And it's totally not necessary. And I know a lot of people would say, but I know from experience. So what I tell people all the time is, like, if you really want to know the answer, just watch what I do with my kid. Now, I know you can't do that in Hamilton or in Toronto or Ottawa, but everybody around here always shakes their head and they go, they thought they were right. Because they go to the tournaments and they'd say, oh, these guys are the best guys in the Ontario and stuff. And I'm like, you have no idea, because the best guys aren't there. They don't need to be there. So my son never played one, and he's never had a power skating coach or a stick handling coach. He's done my stuff, which I guess you can consider myself one of those guys, but he never had a power skating coach, and we never addressed all kinds of issues that people get really worried about, because I know that his passion and his desire when he's not here would overrun, or is that the word? Overrun whatever I'm doing in the hour or two that I have him. So
one of the things I've found actually in some of my decision making, this goes for next year and moving forward, is just keeping my kids in an environment similar to what you're doing, like having strong mentors, coaches that can be great leaders for them, keeping them again in positive environments, healthy family, parent groups, those types of things has become more and more and more important. My kids did do a lot of spring hockey this year, and I was for better or for worse, they got asked a lot, and I think moving forward, I definitely don't want to do as much. And I know, like, not just my son with regards to the brick tournament, but in that 10-year-old, 11-year-old group, there's a ton of kids that I've seen in Ontario that are deserving, possibly more deserving of that so-called top elite tier hockey player. And they just didn't get asked. They didn't have the right contacts. They didn't go to tryouts, etc. My son basically got noticed at a different tournament. We didn't try out. We didn't, I didn't think it was something that we were going to be a part of originally. And he kind of earned his spot. But that being said, like you said, there's a ton of really talented young hockey players that just aren't in the in crowd, the in group, that could have gotten an opportunity. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, considering some parents might think their kids are the best for whatever. And
well,
I hate that term.
The problem with a lot of that is when you do these things is you don't teach your kid how to earn anything. Even it might seem like you're earning something, but you got to understand how the business of hockey works outside. There's a lot of people out there that are just trying to make some money. So they'll take whatever they can. And if, they're better to have $5,000 in my pocket than not. So they say whatever they need to say to get people to do what they want to do. The other side of this is, I think it's really, really important is to understand that. And I said this to my son because he got invited to a spring hockey tournament in Europe, and he was going to play for Team Canada.
Yeah.
And there's about 12 guys from Southwestern Ontario on Team Canada. I said, well, like, I already knew my answer, but I'm like, so you guys don't really believe that this is a Team Canada thing, do you? Do you not get this?
Yeah.
But I told my son, I said, you can go. I can't wait to watch you in Sweden one day, or in Czech, to play in Czech or whatever. And I want you to have that Team Canada jersey, but it's not going to be on my dime. You're going to get invited for real. Yeah. And that's how, because I think a lot of the times with these things is all of a sudden you're taking your kids and you're telling them, oh, you get to play on the brick. You're the best. Mm-hmm. That's not the best message. Mm-hmm. You're going to play with the best players and you're one of the best. And you're already telling your kid that you're the best. Mm-hmm. And that's the wrong message. Your message should be like, as a dad, every day I told my son he's the best kid, that I loved him, that, you're the best to me. I couldn't be more proud. And it wasn't about being the best hockey player. It was about being the best kid. And you know what I mean by that? Like, you're the best. Yeah. I just love you, that kind of stuff. And he knew that his dad knew that he loved him, or he knew that his dad loved him. But as far as telling him you're the best hockey player, well, what happens is, and I've seen this 1,000 times, is they actually think they're the best. And a lot of these kids that think they're the best don't do the work. And if you don't do the work, you will never be the best. You have no chance. So I always told my son that when if you are the best on the ice, well, first of all, if you're not the best on the ice every single day, then you are not the best, period. Like, everywhere you go, you need to be the best if you are truly the best. And to be the best, you have to work hard, because other people are trying to, to be the best as well. So there's a huge competition to be the best player. But the biggest thing is that people underestimate what good is. So, for example, like when he went to the OHL, his first year as a 16-year-old, a lot of these kids thought they all went to a lot of these tournaments and stuff, and then they get to the real hockey, and it's like they don't know how to deal with that adversity because they've always been told they're the best. And now you got a coach saying, yeah, you're getting scratched. Yeah, you're going to be going home. You can't play on this team. And it's like reality sits in. It's like, it's better to learn that when you're 8 than to learn that when it actually matters. So not giving the hockey player everything that he absolutely wants is actually a good thing, because the other thing is, which I think is another really, really important thing, is that what happens as hockey players is once you get to a certain level where it actually matters, like when you're trying to make a living or get your school paid for, hockey is your job. And it's hard for people to understand that it's actually your job. But there's not a lot of people I know that are so excited to go to their job tomorrow. They just can't wait for Friday, right? That's how most people are. And it's the same thing as in hockey. When it gets to become a real business, then it becomes like, I don't want to be on the ice every day anymore. So when you're growing up, to be the best player or to give your best every time is not to play every single day, every single month for 12 months of the year, because it's like, I like steak, but I know if I have steak for a month every night, I'm going to get kind of like, it's just another steak. I'm not going to finish it. It's going to be get kind of bored of it.
Yeah.
But if I get steak once a week or once a month, I look forward to it and I can't wait to have it. And it's the same thing with hockey. If you can take it away a little bit and say, no, you don't get to just play tonight or next weekend because we can, you're going to have to wait. And what happens is there's a little more fear burning. And now they really look forward to play. So what happens is you get your best game rather than, or that game actually matters, because you can't just say, well, tomorrow or this afternoon, I'll just play better.
Yeah.
You actually have to wait. No, I got Saturday and Sunday to play, and that's it. So I gotta put everything into it. And I think that's a huge lesson to learn. So that's my thoughts on spring hockey.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it, and what you're mentioning, I think as a parent, because I'm kind of right in the thick of it right now. I think as a parent, there's a lot, you're obviously I would love my kids to be potential, NHL stars. And I think, at least I hope that they don't just, they're not just telling me that because that's what they want me to hear. I think a lot of the journey is as a father, as a parent, sort of navigating through it all. I think there's a lot of people trying to make money from the sport and pushing and fueling, and telling parents maybe what they want to hear. But I think for me as a dad, and obviously part of this podcast is how can I raise, 3 incredible boys? How can they be 3 great young men? And again, obviously trying to continue to fuel a sport that they love, but also provide them lots of opportunities, but not be crazy about it. And that's obviously why reaching out to you guys and listening to your podcast has been helpful. One of the other questions, just before we sign off here, the other question I had was, does it matter, what level of hockey? And I mean, I sort of know the answer because I've spoken to you before and listened to the podcast, but I've heard you got to play in the GTHL, or you got to play up a level, or you got to play a year above, or you have to play AAA. All these things. I think it's a good question to ask for a lot of parents that are probably going through some of the same challenges and wondering, what the answer might be.
You go first.
Yeah, it's a funny question because it's surprisingly interesting how many kids from around here feel like this isn't good enough for them. They need to move. And all I could say, well, I got a lot to say about it, but Aaron Ekblad is a client of mine.
Yeah, he's not bad. He's all right.
What's that?
He's all right. He's not bad.
Yeah, like he went first overall in the OHL as an exceptional status, and then he won the Canadian Defenseman of the Year, the Rookie of the Year, the NHL Rookie of the Year, and he went first overall in the NHL. And he never left this area. Yeah. So I think it worked out for Aaron, but that works out for everybody. And I can look at my son. We had those offers too. And I'm like, are you crazy? First of all, my son he was a late birthday. So we sent him away at 15 to go to Guelph last year. And that's hard enough. It's hard, man. And I couldn't imagine sending my kid away at 12, 13, 14 for hockey when you have no idea if he's good enough anyways.
Yeah.
But to play to have to play in the GTHL or to move up or whatever, it's nonsense. Because the best example I always use with people is like, I don't know what Wayne Gretzky would have ever done, or Connor McDavid. What did they do? Because they were always the best player on the ice. So people say that, right? You got to play with better players. It's like, well, it runs out if you're the best. Right? So like, what did Connor McDavid do? Like, he would have to play 4 years up, or Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do that stuff. In fact, here's the biggest problem when I see this is when I've seen this very often from kids that come from established, which we call big time programs. And I'll use a couple names, and I don't mean it to say anything negative about them. It's just they're the popular names. The Toronto Marlies, or the Detroit Honey Baked, or the Chicago Mission. Those you got to play for them. It's like, well, the problem that I've seen with a lot of these kids is that they've never lost a hockey game, or they've lost 2.
Yeah.
So they don't know how to lose. And you could say, well, that might be a good thing. But no, it's you haven't lost because you haven't been challenged. It's like, I was listening to a boxer talking about, it was Teddy Atlas maybe, talking about Mike Tyson. He doesn't think he's an actual fighter.
Yeah.
He's a heavyweight champ, but he didn't really win the fights that were actually fights when guys fought back. And that's how you're going to test yourself as a player, is play with on a bad team. Play on a team where you actually have to be the guy, or figure out how to make your teammates better. Learn how to deal with getting a pass that isn't right on the tape. Or playing with kids that aren't at your level. Can you carry them on your back? And having, losing, like, how do you get yourself out of that and face the adversity? And the guys that can do that will have a chance to play at a higher level, because when you play with good players, then you'll probably elevate your game. And it's an attitude. It's really, really important to not get carried away with. And again, it comes down to thinking you're all that. Because I can probably pluck every kid who thinks they're the best in Ontario, and even though they might go first overall in the OHL, and I can show them that there's some real stiff competition, brother.
Yeah.
From all over the place, and it only gets harder. So having that attitude where I'm too good for this, I'm going to go over here and where I actually truly belong. You'll be surprised, and is it really healthy? Come on, man.
Yeah. Sorry, I want to jump in on this and just point out something you said, David, before you asked that question. Was just talking about, as a parent, like how can I raise good kids and all that, and it goes to what Andy was just saying. Is it's difficult. Andy's sitting here talking, and he was a guy that played, he coached, he's trained players, he was in the world right from day one. And for me, like, I didn't really get on into my background at all, but my parents were just your average parents. They had their job. They never played sports. Nobody in my entire family and extended family played a sport. And they had to navigate this just like most of the parents that are probably listening to the podcast. And I think it's important that parents have to understand there's no path, there's no one way, there's no right answer, there's no recipe for you to get your kid. Let's say you really hope and aspire for him to be a professional hockey player, which you shouldn't really. That shouldn't be your primary driver as the parent. But even if it is, you're not going to find the recipe, because it doesn't exist. You're going to find a kid, like I said earlier, that did it every which way. You'll find a guy like Matt Martin that played Double-A until he was 15, and then played Junior C, and then ends up on Steven Stamkos's line and now plays in the NHL. Who thinks that guy's playing in the NHL when he's 12? 0 people. Nobody thinks that, And then you can find Connor McDavid, who is the year up Toronto Marlies stud and went right to the show, being the best all the way up. And you can get really caught up in the small details or the day-to-day decisions that you're making in your little world of being, 10, 11, 12 years old in Ontario. But, we did an episode talking about the NHL draft, and even out of the OHL, there was like 30 guys drafted to the NHL. 30. There's 200 and something players that play in the OHL, and there was 30 that even get a sniff, So it's just important as parents. I really do sympathize too, because I know for my parents, they did not know anything about what decision to make, where to go for information. And the best decision you can make as a parent, for me, having been through it now along a different track, is try to seek out actual quality information and be able to answer the question of why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of parents don't do that. And that was something that I'm really fortunate that my parents always drilled into me from when I was a kid, because most kids are going to be like me. They're going to play their AAA hockey. They're going to maybe play some junior. They might be fortunate enough to play college, and then that's it. And then they're done. Yeah. And then it's real lifetime now. And if you didn't learn any lesson that sports or that hockey can teach you all the way up, because you were so busy, like worried about playing for Honey Baked instead of Victory Honda, or the Marlies instead of the Junior Canadians, or I need to get out of Chatham, Ontario because it's too small, then you don't pay attention to all the things that you can learn to make you, like you said, a good, solid young man, and then set yourself up with good habits for the rest of your life. And I think the important takeaway for whether you're a player or a parent listening to any of our episodes or your podcast is just that. You want to set yourself up for life. If you end up getting beneficial things out of hockey, that's a bonus, and that's great. And you should aspire to have those goals and want to get there. But don't get so caught up on things that you can't control, because you're not going to find the path, man. You won't find the recipe of the step-by-step process that you have to follow,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a perfect closing statement to our podcast today. I think you guys have, for the most part, answered all of the questions I think that I can come up with anyway. And I think it's going to be very helpful for a lot of people to listen to this, and I hope that they continue to listen to your podcast, because I think there's a lot more information available and out there, and definitely what you guys are doing, as I said earlier. I love it, and I appreciate you guys being on today. It's been awesome, and so thank you guys very, very much.
No problem. I'm glad to be on, and if you ever need us again, or one of us at a time, if it's easier, we're happy to help you out.
Yeah,
sure. Thanks a lot for having us on, man. It was great.
I like the fact that I guess you said you're gonna have a Megan Popovic coming on at some point.
Yeah, she's going to be
sports psychologist. I think that's real important. I think it's one thing neglected with a lot of hockey players, but also parents and stuff. There's a lot of lessons in the sports psychologist. So I hope people listen and take that for what it's worth. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Mm-hmm. This wraps up episode 4 of Raising Men. I'm signing off. David Whalen with Eric Palazzolo. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yeah, you got it.
That's awesome. And I've heard Andy say his name as Andy Paquette. Am I pronouncing that correct? Yeah.
I don't know how to say my name, so I say however it's said.
All right. It's all right. No, anyway, I appreciate you guys both. And that is the Power Tech podcast that you guys absolutely have to sign on to. Log on Spotify, go on YouTube. They got some great clips on social media. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. You guys, awesome. All the best.
Thanks a lot, David. See ya.
Cheers, guys.